Some of you may recognize that song. That is from the TV series The Flash that's been airing on the CW for the last 9 seasons. And an old friend of mine happens to be one of the 2 main composers who wrote most of the music on that show. His name is Nathaniel Blume, and you're going to meet him next. Welcome back to Danny Robertson Music, where we try to help you become the best possible performer that you can be on whatever stage you choose. I'm Danny Robertson. Thank you for joining me again this week. I am very excited about this week because you're going to get to meet an old friend of mine, an old grade school buddy of mine, who is a talented composer who works in television. His name is Nathaniel Blume. I've known him as Nathan since we were kids, and he has a lot of great insights about what it takes to become a professional composer creating music for television shows, high-level television shows like The Flash and Arrow. He also did a great show on Fox called Prodigal Son. We're going to get into how Nathan got where he is today in composing for film and television, and talk a little bit about his processes and the way he works to get a lot of music done under sometimes very, very tight schedules. I'm very excited about this one, so let's get right into it. Let's meet Nathaniel Blume. Hey, Nathan, great to see you, man. Long time.
Good to see you. Yeah.
So to give you kind of an idea of what we've started with so far in the video, I've done a quick intro about you, kind of giving everybody an idea of what you've gone through a little bit and where you've got, how you've gotten to where you are. But I was hoping you could kind of elaborate a little bit on what got you started. How did you get into composing? How did you make those right connections to get into making a career out of it? And maybe some of the big projects that you've done in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, great. Okay. So we were classmates, of course. I started trumpet in middle school, and, you know, it was kind of a love affair with music from then on. I was involved with the band and the jazz band at school, and that was kind of never really enough for me. So I seeked out other opportunities. Of course, like the solo and ensemble contests that were in Indiana and everything. And various bands that you could audition for, and then you would rehearse and do a concert with them. By the time I got to high school,
I have to ask you an odd question about this before we get deep into this. Was your band teacher a guy named Tony by chance?
No, Mrs.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah,
The one at the other school, if you know what I'm talking about there. He and I still play in a band to this day. I'm actually playing a gig with him this week. So yeah.
That's great.
Good group, but yeah. Nice. Okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Off there. Keep going.
All good. No, it's so by the time I got to high school, of course, high school is big with the marching band. That's a big deal there. It's a big time investment, and you really get into it. So pretty much the entire fall is taken up with, you start in the summer before classes even start. And then it's every evening, all day Saturday, all through the fall. And so there usually isn't much time to do really anything else. So after that, I got involved with the Fort Wayne Youth Symphony, which is, you know, sponsored by the Fort Wayne Philharmonic. I'm assuming it's still going, although I haven't really checked in on that in a while. But
and they've had some up and downs with the Philharmonic this last couple of years.
Yeah.
So yeah, we won't go into that.
Right. Yeah, yeah, that's a whole other podcast. But yeah, so that was a great outlet for me, and in the meantime, a lot of what I was listening to was, of course, the pop music of our high school days, but also film scores. and the John Williams and David Arnold, a lot of the composers that wrote big trumpet stuff,
Huh?
I would usually get into, and try to work it out on my trumpet, and kind of always had it in the back of my mind that that was an area that I would want to pursue. But to be honest, there was also that uh, very practical side of
Yeah.
in my head where I was also interested in medicine. Um,
Really?
and yeah, oddly enough. So, and actually, I attribute part of this to my obsession with X Files at the time. And I was really interested in forensic science. And so there was a part of me that really wanted to be a forensic pathologist for the FBI for quite a while.
Really?
Um,
Wow, I didn't
so,
know any of this.
yeah, yep. So when I applied to a few different colleges and ended up choosing Butler University in Indianapolis because um, I got a scholarship for playing trumpet and also an academic scholarship, and I could go in as a double major, um, trumpet performance and chemistry. So I could be on a pre med route, but I wasn't quite
100%
ready or
sure. Yeah.
able to give up music. Yeah.
Wow.
So like, okay, I'll be a forensic pathologist and I'll play in a community orchestra or something. I just couldn't give that aspect up. Um, but in my first semester at Butler, I met one of the composition professors there named Michael Shelley, who's also a huge film buff, and we just kind of got to talking and exchanging likes and dislikes, and talking about the business. And eventually I was just like, yeah, you know what, I can't, like, I just have to do that. And so dropped both of those other majors and switched to music composition in my first year there. And thankfully both of my parents were extremely supportive. They had every reason to think that I was a nut, and give me a talk about safe bets and making sure that I could make a living and all that. But they were extremely supportive,
And they let you
and
go. That's great.
yeah. So from there, I did my undergrad there, and there was no film program there. I was more working on. It's a liberal arts college too, so I had to take a lot of different courses there, um, and pretty much just focused on concert music, writing for the stage, and
Okay.
then by the time I was done there, I felt that I was still pretty inexperienced and new to composition. I didn't really want to make a full on move into the film world yet. I felt like I needed more structure,
Oh,
and my professor at the time had told me about a few different colleges to apply to for a master's degree, and so I did, and I ended up selecting Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. Um, because I really liked the then professor. He's since retired. His name's Leonardo Ballata. Um, this Spanish composer, Spanish American composer, who was just very very cutting edge and very avant garde in his approach, but still, to me, I could latch on to the drama in his music, and he kind of, when I first met him and he was listening to my music, um, I really, I'll never forget it. He turned to me and he goes, "There's a fire in you." So, I think what he was referring to was I did have a penchant for the dramatic in my music, so I kind of always was sort of primed for the screen or
exactly what you got into, basically, right?
yeah, right. Right.
That's
there
great.
is always that leaning. Uh, and So I did that for 2 years. And um, while I was at Carnegie Mellon, I sought out students who were making films there. And that's kind of where I first was able to actually, put some sort of knowledge to use there. And I was all self taught too. Again, at Carnegie Mellon at the time, and kind of still, there was no real focus on writing for the screen. So
I'm sure
all the
that.
technical details of
Yeah.
syncing. Yeah. Well, I teach there now. I have a course there where
I was going to bring that into the conversation, but yeah,
yeah,
thank you for throwing that in
that's jumping way ahead. But
there.
yes, but still, there's no program, there's no major, and there's no formal program for that. Um, but at the time, yeah, it was all self taught, and I was had a very crude setup at the time. As you and I had spoken previously, I bought a program called Reason, and I found a way to import the video. Yeah, and very crude because there was no. I mean, I even back then there's no like bars and beats, and there was no time code. I mean, this was all just very, very
Yeah, and back then it
crude.
was designed to be a plugin for another program, right? So
Yeah.
it was very mechanical at that point in time. It's since become its own digital audio workstation, but it's not quite up to the same par as what you're used to working with in like Pro Tools and all that stuff. But yeah. Yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
keep going.
So, so yeah, I was doing student films that way, um, and sort of, it just dipping my toes in the water of what it's like to work with a writer, director, filmmaker, and take their ideas, try to musically represent them, play it for them, get feedback, all of that. I was learning in a very low risk environment because, of course, I wasn't being paid. There was, minimal visibility, basically other students on campus and stuff. So it was a really great training ground for that. And then
How did the
so I
transition happen
graduated.
from how did the transition happen from that low risk type of creating music for other students essentially to how did you get to that point where you started to make it a career?
Yeah, I took a couple years off of school after that, which was nice. I moved back to Indianapolis and worked for the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra, just in the office. I was an administrative assistant there, and I was able to, have a day job and, like I said, take a break from school, which felt important to me at the time. And I was still working on films, just from, people that I met. I met some local filmmakers in Indianapolis. They were
Okay.
called Ank Movies, um, and did some stuff for them. I met a guy who, his name's John Sherman. He uh, got a grant to produce an opera, and he did the libretto.
Oh,
So we did one scene from the opera. It was about 20 minutes. That I wrote the music for that, and we performed it downtown in Indianapolis. And that was a great experience too. Again, not film, but writing dramatically for
or
a visual
yeah,
medium.
that's great.
Um, so all of these things I think were accumulated experience that helped me by the time I finally was ready to apply to USC, which I always knew was like the pinnacle program in the country, for writing for film and TV. There are other ones that are very good. Of course, like NYU and Berkeley and and a couple others now
There's some up and
too.
comers too, right? There, I think there's one out of Savannah, Georgia that's doing that.
Yeah, there's quite a few now. Um, and I was lucky enough to apply and get right in, and I got married, and we both moved out to Los Angeles all all in the same year. It was kind of a crazy time. And the USC program is, and it still is, just 1 year. At the time, it was a graduate certificate program, and now it's a master's. You can actually get a master's degree in 1 year, and
Wow.
it is an intense year. I mean, that's basically all you're doing all day and night, you know, for the whole year. You've got classes with working professionals in the industry, um, and at the same time, you've got to go, if you're going to really make your time worthwhile. You meet the filmmakers there at USC. You do their student films, and you're doing all of that on the side. None of that's required work for
Yeah.
the program. That was a very, very exciting but challenging year. You're also in the recording studio multiple times with union musicians. So you're gaining all this real world experience.
Wow.
Again, in a, in your academic bubble environment
Yeah.
where, like,
You're getting
same
that
thing.
professional experience of what the expectation is going to be, right? So,
Yeah.
wow.
And then after that, you're thrown into the fire. So it's you're living in Los Angeles, a very high cost of living area, and you've got to find work. And I was extremely fortunate. I had a couple of jobs that summer following USC before, um, one of my professors at USC was looking for an assistant, and pretty much everybody in my class applied for it and interviewed for it. And I was not the first choice. Uh,
Really?
and someone else was hired. It didn't work out, and I had heard, I'd gotten word of this, and so I emailed him and said, "Hey, I heard
I
things
think
didn't
it
work
is. Is
out."
this who I think it is that you have a long-term relationship with now? Okay.
This started my relationship with Blake Neely, and yeah, so I had started that following Monday. I think it was August 1st, of that summer, and I've been working with him on something in some capacity ever since. Obviously, I started out as his assistant. I was running to get coffees. I was answering phones, um, emails, and I was also the tech, for the studio. It was basically just he and I at first, and even though he was extremely busy at the time, he had 3 television shows. It was still a relatively small operation for the amount of work that he had.
Really?
And over the years, he hired, more and more people, and it kind of grew into a bigger company. And throughout all those hires, yeah, I was kind of uh, doing less and less administrative duties, so to speak, and doing more and more writing and creative decisions, um,
That's
to the
cool.
point where, yeah, there were some projects that he just couldn't do, and he could hand them over to me. One of those being the CNN documentary series, The Decades,
Yeah.
that started out with the 60s, and we worked on that together. And I was uncredited on that one, but then there was the 70s, and we were co-credited, and we did that one together. And then from the 80s on, he was just like, just take it. um,
That's cool.
and yeah, so then that was kind of the first, the first big show that I did completely by myself. um, and uh, and then that eventually evolved into other things down the road.
And
But
you just finished just so I think I'm in the right place with this. You guys just finished the 2010s, right?
yes,
So is
yep,
there
that
expected to
just
be work
finished.
for the 2020s and all that stuff later on? Is that kind of the case or?
No, yeah, that now it's kind of up in the air. They have done a couple of sort of, I mean, for lack of a better term, spin-offs.
Okay.
One was 1968, and it was
Oh
four
yeah.
episodes just on that year.
Was that
Um,
that was all
and
you? That was all you that did the music?
yep,
Wow.
yep.
Know that.
And then there was another spinoff that actually Blake came back for this one, called The Movies. And so they specifically looked at each decade, but just the movies of those decades.
I'm sure you
And
both
we did
love
that
that
one.
because the compositions that like the John Williams, the Hans Zimmers, all the ones that did all the
Yeah.
music, all of those guys are all great, and the music's great in a lot of those. So
Yeah. And it was challenging because of that. Because obviously when we were talking about some of those films, we didn't want to, try to mimic the scores of
ah,
these films. Um, in a few cases, we did sort of evoke some of the time period of it. Like for instance, with the Hitchcock films, we did kind of skew a little more into that world,
into the
but
creep factor and all that.
yeah, but for the most part, um, we were just trying to convey the general emotions, or kind of help propel the story of how these movies got made and why they're historically relevant, rather than attempt to put a Jaws score underneath Jaws or something like that. So
Yeah, that might be a
um,
little too on the nose or something like that.
yeah, yeah. So it came with its challenges, but it was also very, very, it was extremely well done. So it
Oh,
was fun to be a part of that project.
that's great. Okay, so you're at the point where you've started to create your own music for the purpose of commercial career. How, I have to ask this part. I know that you probably don't want to go into this part of the equation as much, but tell me about how this turned into the Arrowverse and all of that stuff and how you got really involved in the Flash and all of those. So,
Yeah. So about 4 years in, uh, working with Blake, um, this pilot came up for Arrow, and
okay.
we had no idea what was coming after that, of course. But at the time, it was this really interesting thing. We'd done a superhero show before that called No Ordinary Family for
Yeah.
ABC.
With,
Yeah,
oh, Michael, what's his name with the bald head?
Nicholas.
Yes. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember that show.
yeah.
That was you guys?
That was a fun show. It was short lived, but it was really fun, and we recorded every week for that show. So um, it was a good experience. But when Arrow came around, we knew it was going to be very different from that. Greg Berlanti, who created both of those shows and has created
A
a
lot.
lot of the shows that Blake has done over the years, he wanted to do a darker, grittier show, and a gritty version of Arrow. Blake came up with a suite, as he typically does, and it's something that I've kind of picked up from him, and he sort of picked up from Hans Zimmer before that, where when you start a project, um, you can read the script, maybe you've seen a few scenes, and then you go away from picture and come up with a suite of musical ideas, maybe 5 minutes, maybe longer, um, and you sort of try to hit how you're going to approach the different dramatic points, like how are you going to do the action, how are you going to do the romantic aspects, things like that. So Blake did that, and from that we kind of split up and started doing the score for Arrow, and it got picked up, and of course started a uh,
Slew
whole
of
shows after that. Yeah.
That's cool. Okay, so specific to what, so you did Arrow together, right? Then you built
Well,
in. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
to clarify, I'll so yes, I was writing with him on Arrow. It was mostly him, and I was uncredited at the time. And Arrow, of course, spawned Flash,
Yeah.
and then came Supergirl, and then Legends, and it kept building from there, and it got to a certain point where Blake, uh, at that time, had built his studio out to quite a few people, and there were three of us that he selected to essentially co-write with him and be credited
Oh, really?
on the shows. So I started first with Flash and then eventually Arrow, and my name actually went on the episode, and
I know,
responsibilities
it's
increased to.
funny because I got to tell you, the first time I learned about the fact that you were connected to those, I went
Mhm.
back and watched a couple of episodes of The Flash and specifically looked for the end credits. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. How did I miss this for all of this time? And so it was a cool
Yeah,
thing when I found out about that. But yeah. Yeah. So,
cool.
okay. So there was a point where you completely transitioned to doing all of the music for The Flash yourself, correct? Or for the most
You
part?
know, for the most part, Blake stayed involved the whole way. He's just that kind of guy. Um, I mean, he he just really wants to. If his name's on it, he wants to be involved. There are certainly composers in Hollywood who do projects with their name on it and don't write a single note. And that's their choice. I would kind of lean toward the Blake side of things, where if my name is on it,
Signed off. Yeah.
yeah, I would at least want to contribute something.
Yeah.
And he has. So yes, I was writing, the majority of the Flash by the end, but he was always still involved, and still writing and watching everything and producing the score. That's just the way that he works, and it's it, there are lots of very busy composers, of course, in Hollywood, but there are none that I know of that write as much music as Blake does. He's just uh, I don't know how he finds the time. I mean, obviously he's in the studio a good number of hours, but still the output that he has is kind of unrivaled by anyone. And it was great for me to sort of cut my teeth, so to speak, next to him and watch him work and see how he does things fast and still good and
Cool.
everything. So yeah,
Very inspirational to work with him, that kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, totally. And he's just a great guy. Thank goodness. Again, if you work for a composer in Hollywood, that you can run the gamut just like you can in any walk of life. You can walk with someone, you can work with someone who has little to no regard for your personal life, and all they care about is your work for them. And if you're not there until the wee evening hours for any little thing that they need, then they're upset about it, and they expect that from you. And then you get the complete other side of things, um, where you're clocking in and out at regular hours, and you have a life, and there is that regard for you as a human being, and of course there's everything in between, because the business is unpredictable, and you could get notes on something at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and they expect it the next day,
Oh yeah.
and you'll be working that night. So that's just kind of the nature of the business there. But you can approach it with dignity and regard for the people who work with you or you cannot. And Blake was nothing but fantastic. So I'm extremely lucky and fortunate for that too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. This is great stuff, man. Okay, so let's transition really quick and let's talk about Prodigal Son, because as far as I'm concerned, I believe that was your first step into your own branded network, like real network show that you did by yourself, right?
Correct. Yeah. Uh, Prior to that, I'd done a lot of co-credits, as we've talked about, and there was a show on ABC called Deception that
Yeah.
Blake and I did together. Again, a show that was cut down, before
Prime, right?
it got to get really good. Yeah,
That was
um,
about the
I think
magician or something, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember that one.
magician who works with the FBI. Yeah, one of those procedural type shows, but had its own twist, and it was just fun. Another show that we recorded weekly with an orchestra, so that's always fun. Um, but
Cool.
one of the creators of that show, his name is Chris Fedak. Prior to that, he did Chuck and worked on a couple other shows. Um,
Okay.
Amazing guy, and just not only a great filmmaker, but also just a great guy. And he's way into the music side of things. He loves scores in general. So we talk about scores and just one of those that's such a pleasure to work with throughout the process because he gives really great, respectful, but also um, uh, you know intricate notes throughout the process. So
Oh,
what
okay.
typically happened is we would write the music for the whole episode and then send a QuickTime video, and he would watch it and send notes. And there were always great notes. He's very dramatically minded, not changing little creative things or creative decisions that we made, but things that would really dramatically help the story. Um, and so shortly after that show, he was creating another one called Prodigal Son with someone named Sam Sclaver. The two of them co-created it, and I had seen that they were doing this in the trades, and my agent had seen it as well, and we were talking about it. And as a respectful gesture, I talked to Blake about it because we did Deception together, and I said, "Hey, Chris has a new show. Would you mind if I went up for this, or if you want to do it together, I totally understand." And he said, "No, go for it." So I got in touch with Chris, and he said, "Oh yeah, I would love to work with you again." And we're going to be done with the script here pretty soon, and I'll send it to you. So he sent me the script really close to when they were starting to film, and I read it, and it's a great script. And my idea for the suite in this, and I did my own suite in this
Okay.
instance,
Okay.
was I dramatically went through the first act of the script, and so kind of had an idea of what I would do with the first scene, which was this flashback, and then it goes into an action scene, and I wrote some action music, and so on and so forth, through all of the scenes of the first act.
Wow.
Uh, and by the time I finished that, I sent it to Chris, who was on set in New York filming, and he listened to it, and he was like, "This is great. I like this. Um, this has got to come back. This is like our main theme, and all this." And so I was able to
Was that
uh,
the D minor that
edit.
you started with? The da 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 da.
Yeah,
I love that.
yep,
That was a great, like, it was you could consistently hear it in your head, but you got the creepy factor from just listening to that first little intro, and yeah.
Cool.
Sorry. Anyway, keep
Good.
going.
No, all good. Yeah. So, and the part in the suite was that theme. Well, actually, the theme was in there quite a bit, but one particular moment was just solo piano with kind of these creepy sounds in the background. And that was the part that he was really drawn to. And he was like, this is almost like Hitchcock. This is what I want the show to sound like. It's pitched as a thriller for prime time. Um, so that was great because, and this is the advantage of doing a suite and playing it early, because all those ideas are in his head now. Then he likes them, thank goodness. Uh, and and now we have a shared vocabulary, a shared musical vocabulary of how to approach the show. Once they were starting to send me scenes, which when you're in the pilot process, it can work a number of different ways. But in this case, for this major network show, it's usually sending scenes at a time as opposed to the whole thing cut together at once. And then I'm able to just start throwing the suite up against these scenes and seeing,
Oh.
okay, that works, but not really. I would change this, and or none of that works. I got to come up with something else. But he likes this theme, so maybe I'll use that theme, um, and that's just kind of how the ball gets rolling early on. And the pilot process is very rigorous.
One thing I want to point out with this one that I want to make sure everybody knows what you did with this suite was tell everybody about the how you came up with the Hitchcock sounds that you used. Like, because this is neat. Like, you made your own set of sounds for this, and I just found that
Yes.
really cool. But
So for the for the percussion, um, I had this idea since the main serial killer was nicknamed the Surgeon. I had this idea that I would get surgical instruments and record the sounds from them. So I got onto eBay, and funny enough, you can order surgical instruments off of eBay. And
how you did that?
I'm sure I'm flagged somewhere as someone to watch, but I got bone cutters and scalpels and scissors and all of there was an actual kit of stuff, um, and then went into the recording studio and recorded scissors cutting gauze, um,
Oh no,
recorded the bone cutters. We dried out chicken bones from chicken wings and then snapped them with these bone cutters in the microphone.
so
And
cool.
like when I all I know from actual surgeries is what you see on TV. So like when the surgeon is doing his thing or her thing and they drop their instruments in a metal pan, as they're going,
Yeah,
um, that I
essentially became a
associate that
Foley
sound
artist.
with
It became a
with that.
Foley artist for creating the musical compositions behind the scenes. That's just
Yeah.
cool, man. That's
So yeah, and then I my assistant and another guy that I worked with, Ling and Thor were their names. We all kind of went back, chopped up all that audio, made contact instruments that are playable on the keyboard. So I essentially had a drum library of sorts, but with these sounds that I'd created, and it created loops and things like that. Um, and both of them also kind of helped me come up with other haunting sounds with other using other various synths and things like that. And and yeah, that was used percussively throughout the whole show. And it was a little trial and error. As you said, you mentioned Foley. One of the things that unfortunately didn't work as well as we'd hoped was the bone crushing.
really
That particular sound was just a little too Foley like and distracting. I
In
I'm
conflict with
sure
the rest of the
also,
audio?
yeah. So when actually put onto screen, that bone crushing sound in most instances was just too much.
Okay.
And but we learned that, it was a trial and error thing. A lot of the other sounds worked fantastic. That particular sound just didn't happen to work as well. It is in the end credits though, so it's not conflicting with anything, and it's in a couple other scenes in the show, but largely that particular sound was cut.
That
But it
show was
helped.
just so cut. I felt like that show was like primed to really grow an audience, and it got cut in its prime. It was such a good show.
It really did. I mean, and I'm biased, of course, but I feel like, especially in season two, the show knew what it was, and it
Well, it
knew.
ended on a huge cliffhanger, didn't it? If I
Yeah,
remember right. And it was
huge clip. Yeah.
like it was disappointing to really hear that one. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna cut this off because I know we're running short on time. Um, since we're talking about how you kind of got into creating your own library of sounds and stuff, can we get into like your process that you did to create it pretty much for any of these shows that you've done, The Flash, the Prodigal Son, the 2000s? Um, what's your process like? Like I know you showed me the other day your entire studio setup. Is there a chance we can move the video a little bit to kind of see what you do
Sure.
and how you put
Yeah.
this all together?
Yes, for sure. So technically, when writing, when I'm in the writing process, I sequence in Logic Pro.
Okay.
Um, that's I would say there are many different uh, applications that are used in the industry. Logic being one of the most common. Cubase is another very common one. And then
And you're talking about, just so for the audience members that are watching this that don't know what that is, these are called digital audio workstations. And really what they are is it's the multi-track recording process that's available for recording all the audio and anything that's done on a sequencer, like with keyboard instruments and things like that, right?
yes, so I'm writing and performing to a certain extent into Logic, um, and capturing that MIDI information that's translated to audio with the software instruments. And as I'm doing that, I'm actually recording into Pro Tools. So I have both Logic and Pro Tools running at the same time, which is also another fairly common practice in the industry. Although there's a million different ways of doing this. Um, but I like this because Pro Tools runs my video, which is up on my TV screen, and I can go over in Pro Tools and look at the big picture.
Okay.
Essentially, this has the video and audio files for the video, meaning the dialogue, the sound effects, and all of that. But it also has every single cue that has been written for the episode. So
Okay.
when I'm done in Logic, I hit record in Pro Tools and record what I've done into the timeline, so it's perfectly matched up with picture, and
Uh,
I can hear what was done on the previous cue. So for the cue I'm writing, I want to make sure it comes out of that in a
Naturally
musical
out of the
way.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it's not jarring. Maybe you want it to be jarring though. So
Yeah.
maybe to be in a different key at a different tempo in a very dramatic way, or maybe you want it to just come out in the same key uh, in a fluid way that you don't notice. You've gone to another cue in the timeline. It's just one musical idea that continues.
That actually
Um,
brings up a point. Okay, so like you've got the two versions of the Flash on the video there. Like, um, you've talked about how you've created a product suite. Do you apply that into like creating different themes for different sections of the show or different characters, or you know
yeah,
where I'm going with that, right?
especially with these with the Arrowverse shows. Um, it was definitely done in a very uh, a thematic way where almost every character has their own theme. Um, it's typically presented, in a heroic way when they're doing something heroic, and in a emotional way when they're having one of the emotional beats. Um,
Oh, cool.
but you can also get theme fatigue sometimes, so you don't want to overuse the theme, but it's there as something that identifies the audience, whether that's overtly, and the audience might notice, oh, that's Flash's theme,
Uh,
or in a more subtle manner, to just kind of work as a musical glue for the show. But yes, there's uh, throughout all of the shows, there's many, many, many themes, and maybe one of these days, it could be organized in such a way where people could actually see them. But I mean, there's got to be well over 100. I don't even know. I couldn't even begin to guess how many different themes there are among all of the Arrowverse shows, but there's a lot.
how do you keep that all straight? I mean, like, do you and Blake kind of have a process that you kind of organize them into folders based on the character or something like that, or
Not exactly. I think the biggest uh, way that we keep track of it is if it's not in our head, we have an iTunes library of
okay.
everything that's been written for all of the shows, to this point. So, and if we have been intelligent about it and named the queue such as Cisco saves the day or something like that, then you can search Cisco, and be like, oh, there we go. Okay,
Oh,
and that can work not just to refresh your mind for themes, but it can also be maybe a starting point for a new cue, because obviously there's a lot of music that's written for every episode. On these shows, it's 35 to 40 minutes of score.
how long would
And
that take you for an individual show? Like, how much work, how much time commitment does it take for you to create the entire score for a single episode, for
Well, we
example?
usually have about a week. And it is a team based thing. So, Blake and I are doing it together. It doesn't all fall on just one of us. And we have a couple additional writers too who might do a cue or two amongst them each week, which lightens the load a little bit.
Four
And
minutes worth
like I
of
said,
music in a week?
mhm,
That's
yeah,
creating an album every week.
yeah. And so you have to find ways to get there. And it's splitting up the work. It's maybe finding a cue that uh, is sort of somewhat appropriate, and it gives you that uh, that inspiration or that idea of how to approach the scene, and just make it different and make it more appropriate for the scene you're working on. But then, you have the times where there's a new character or there's a brand new situation that you have to come up with something completely new for it.
Yeah,
There's
like
nothing that,
like what you were
yeah,
talking about with the ending of The Flash. There was a series of episodes that were called, what was it, Brand New World or something like that?
yeah, Brave New World,
Brave New
or
World.
a new world, or something. I
Yeah, and
think a
you
new
you had
world.
a theme
Yeah,
that you had to create for all of that, right?
yeah. Sometimes there were story arc themes, like Armageddon was in season 8.
Yeah.
And then we have the crossovers like Crisis on Earth X, and all of those kind of have like a crisis theme. So yeah, there's always new material, but then there's also ways to not make it so daunting. Like you don't have to write 35 to 40 minutes of completely original music in a week's time for 20 weeks straight, which
Okay.
it was just like, I mean, that's near impossible. Uh, but yeah, you got to find ways to serve the show and actually get it done.
That, you just told me that, and I'm a little floored. Now I'm thinking about, when we first started talking about the possibility about doing this interview, you were
Mhm.
right in the middle, in the thick of this, and I can tell why you wanted to wait until when we could do this, because you
Yeah,
would have had no time whatsoever, right?
right. Yeah,
Um, I know we're running really short on time. I know you only have about 5 minutes left to be able to talk. So, why don't we move on from this? But maybe what we do is, at some point, let's look at maybe coming back to this and getting more into the thick of it, if we can. Okay. And
sure. Yeah.
eh, yeah, the last thing I wanted to make sure we kind of uh, went into a little bit is, there's a lot of people that are out there, musicians, performers, that would love to be in your shoes or be a fly on the wall for the things that you do. What kind of words of wisdom would you have for those up and coming composers, up and coming performers that would love to get into TV and that kind of composing?
I think I would say do anything you can to get any experience at any level. Um, the stuff that helped me early on, as I spoke about earlier, was finding filmmakers. Whether that's if you're in school and there's students at your school making films, that's a great way to start. Locally, there may be some people making films. There might be film groups that meet up to talk about film, um, and there's some stuff online. There are workshops that you can apply to. Um, just anything you can do to get some experience.
Oh,
All experience is good experience, and all of those pieces um, add up to how you perform later. And it really is in the industry. It's the cliched thing where um, the the people who go into it with no sort of backup plan, essentially, that's uh, they stick it out no matter what. Those are the people who eventually find success. It could take time. Everybody's path is different. So
the old
I
saying,
would,
if you never actually quit it, you've not failed. So
yeah,
even if you think you're failing, if you haven't stopped doing it, you got to keep going, right? So
I
yeah,
I'd never heard it put quite that way, but that's perfect. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It, and like I said, any experience is something. If you work for a composer, and the most you get to do is maybe sit there and watch them work for a little bit, um, that's something, and you should absorb what they're doing and take it in and apply it to yourself. I wish I could, lay out a path that it's just like, if you do this, then you've got a career. But of course, it doesn't work that way. But anything you can do to stay busy, um, and get experience. Um, you don't necessarily have to go to school for it, but that turns into a great networking opportunity.
mm,
Um, but also just being in it. Um, if you're in Los Angeles and you're look up who's working, how to get in at a low level into a studio, go to film festivals, talk to people. If you see a film that you like, go tell the filmmakers afterward how much you like it and what you do, and uh,
right.
just things like that.
That's great.
because you never know. Yeah, you never know. But
Well, okay, I know we're right on the cusp of being out of time, so I just want to say I'm very appreciative of you coming on and talking with everybody about your experiences and how you got to where you've gotten. I feel like we missed out on a lot of what we could have gotten into today. So I might, if you're up for it, I might have you back sometime in the next little bit here, so we can talk more at that point. But appreciate you coming on. And last question before we go, and you don't have
okay.
to answer if you don't want to.
Oh, no.
How do you feel about the new Flash movie and how that has been compared to your work? And
um, I will say, uh, I'm gonna stay very Switzerland on this if I can and be very neutral. Uh, I don't want to get myself in any trouble. I will say though that I have not seen the movie, and I am in no rush to, uh, especially coming off of 9 years of doing the Flash for the CW. I can't bring myself to go see it in another form yet. and
not quite the same, is it? But
It's not. One day I will watch it and I will have some opinion on it. But for now, Grant Gustin is my Flash, and he's my guy. He's an amazing guy, off screen as well. Uh,
I'll
and
get into
so
that part of the conversation.
he's
Okay.
incredible. Yeah,
Okay. I think I'm going to have you back on if you're up for it at any point in time.
sure,
So,
we will do it.
all right, man.
Thanks
Well,
for having me.
I very much appreciate this, and we'll catch up soon. And you take care in the meantime. Thanks for coming on.
You absolutely. See you soon.
Thanks for watching till the end of this one today. I know this was a longer video than we normally do, but Nathan had such great information to share. After the interview, Nathan and I talked a little bit and felt like we didn't have enough time to get through everything that we wanted to talk about today. So there's a good chance that we're going to revisit this interview and have more discussion about his processes and some of the things that you want to know about how to make music for television. If you're curious to learn more about Nathan and the work that he's done composing for television, I'll include a couple of links in the description below. You can also leave any questions or comments you might have for him right here on this YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe to my email list and this YouTube channel when you get a chance. And thanks again for watching. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you soon. Take care.